Hello, welcome to In Our Community. I'm your host today, Jim Ducey, and I'll be interviewing Marc Isaac Potter. You can find many of his previous interviews on the KMVT 15 YouTube channel. Marc's been writing poetry and short stories for 50 years and has developed a very interesting and unique style, from stream of consciousness to absurdism, kind of dark and haunting to bright and very optimistic. You never know what you're going to find when you pick up one of Marc's books. He loves reading, participating in both Christian and Buddhist churches. He authors 2 blogs and is a longtime producer of shows here at KMVT. So good afternoon, Marc.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you.
Looking forward to an interesting conversation about your recent work.
Sounds good.
So before we start, I'd like to talk to you about the titles of your books. So the things that I've read that you've given to me over the years are cliffs, rocks, plants, all natural kinds of things. Today we're going to be reading from 112 Rocks and 120 Rocks. So what's the significance of cliffs, rocks, plants?
What I'm trying to do is get down to the basics. The ground, the rocks, the plants, the very basics of our earth. I like to start there, even though my pieces might not be referencing nature a lot, although they do some. I like to really just, in my mind, I'm kind of sitting down on the ground with a little bit of dirt in my hands, kind of going like this. That's how I feel.
Seeing what you find.
Seeing what I find. I'd like to see the real basics. I have one piece that I read a while back in which me and 2 baby walruses are on some gravel.
Yeah, I remember that.
I like that kind of stuff. Very basic.
So is there a difference in the themes between cliffs and rocks? Would I find something different as I went through them?
Cliffs came first, and to me a cliff is more lofty. I think if you went through all the poems you wouldn't necessarily find those to be more lofty, but that's just how I regard it. And the rocks are smaller and more individuated. I hope to do something in the future called pebbles.
Oh, well, that's interesting. That'll be even more granular.
Yes, granulated, yes.
Least stuff. All right, so let's start with testing for Zen. So this is from your book, 112 Rocks. And so it's an interesting piece. Do you need to introduce it at all, or you just want to start?
In the beginning, we talk about the Higgs boson, which is a particle that for many decades couldn't be found, couldn't be detected, and it was recently detected. So that's important, and the rest of it I think we'll talk about afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. That's very interesting introduction. At the beginning, you say, did the wisp of Zen just pass through life?
Yes.
So that's really interesting. So when you think about the Higgs boson and that.
Yes, that's exactly how they found it. They found it by detecting it in a cloud.
Yeah. So here, let's read this and talk about it.
All right, sir. Testing for Zen. It's a little bit like looking for the Higgs boson. Thus, ask yourself, did the wisp of Zen pass through this life? Part 2. A young country girl, late in the morning, after the dew has cleared, before the heat of the day is pronounced, please detect the footsteps of a young country girl, 4, perhaps 5 years old. How did she walk across this concrete slab? Diagonally? Or perhaps in ever-increasing circles? Ever widening? This concrete slab is, for example, on a children's playground of a big city where she is visiting her cousin Annabeth for the first time. Part 3. Watching for invisible bird. On this spot, 63 years ago, a woman came to mourn the death of her husband in surgery. At that time, this little spot in eastern Kentucky was still known by some folks as Catalpa, although the village name was fading from use. The woman's grief was particularly acute because her husband was only having surgery around this time for the most tragic reason. Surgery for a miraculous reason, he lived on. An idiotic reason to fix an error. I don't know what the word is, but I'm getting that surgery should have been minor, just to fix an error, so that his death was still all the more mournful because unexpected and somehow unmerited, since the surgeon had felt the previous surgery would be of no use, i.e. fatal, he had not sewn the man up properly. But then the man lived on and on. Now the surgeon had to go back in and fix his mistake. During the second surgery, the man died on the operating table. The man had been the husband of this woman crying under the weeping willow tree. Her name is Elizabeth Potter. Can you tell me what bird flew away out of the branches of this weeping willow tree when Grandma's pain cries got to be too much? The land upon which the tree stood has decades ago become a power plant. So the tree is long gone. Can you find the tiny scratches that the bird's precious feet made in the bark of that one particular branch of the tree as it took flight?
That is so interesting. So now Zen is interesting to me, but I have not studied it. And whenever you try to find something about what is Zen,
yes,
you get a very Zen
elusive,
answer.
elusive, seemingly elusive answer.
Just so. So something I had just recently read was Zen is a path to fully awaken to your original nature. And many of those words can expand
Yeah.
into a universe.
Yes,
but
they can.
the idea is that it's not just mindfulness or peacefulness or calm or anything.
Right.
It's searching.
Right.
So now I liked both of the images there.
Okay.
With the girl who's walking across, you find her at the edge of a playground.
Right.
How did she get there?
Yes. Well,
How
it says
did
that
she
she
get there?
came to visit her friend.
Did she? But she's just standing there when you're
Yes.
observing her.
Yes.
Did she just walk diagonally
Yes.
across
Yeah.
without any thought about anything?
Yeah.
Or did she play along the way?
Yes. Yes.
Going in circles
Very
and
nice.
coming back
Yes.
and across
Yes.
again. So when you are looking at this from a Zen perspective, I mean, do you, or do you just say, well, it's just life? But something happened to get her here.
Yes.
And so to imagine how did she get here
Yes.
is the thing I find interesting about that. And the second part of it, now you should explain to us a little bit later, this is actually about your grandparents.
Yes.
So, you know, I'd like
Yeah.
to hear, and you put that in a footnote,
Yeah,
that it's
yes.
about your grandparents. So in that, again, you know, it's sort of like I'm observing this power plant. Do you have any idea what has happened on this spot? And then it goes back to the people who were there, and then back to a little bird who's
Right.
scratching its little
Right.
claws on the tree.
Right.
So just again, you know, to see something, just to come upon a situation or a place,
Right.
you really have to back up and you find a universe that led to this thing.
Right.
That's what I got out of this
Okay.
poem. So
You got more than I did. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Very beautiful. No, I was very touched by my grandfather's situation because he had some surgery. This was the first surgery. The surgeon decided, this is the way the story was told in our family for many years. The surgeon decided that he wasn't going to live. So he didn't sew him up all the way.
that's remarkable.
So he just let him go unsewed up. he lived on and on. So then the surgeon decided, well, I better go sew him back up. When he went to the second surgery to sew him up, he passed away.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's tragic. Yeah, and my grandmother was always haunted by that, by losing her husband that way.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, just kind of came up in our conversation was, poets often can't or don't want to explain
Right.
what they're trying to say in their works. It's up to the reader
Right.
to elicit what it means to them.
Right.
But when you write, do you try for, I see a lot of allegory in your work.
Okay.
So that really what you're doing is taking an experience and not describing the experience,
Okay.
but describing the feeling that you got from it.
Okay. Okay.
So when somebody is reading this work, however they get to that same feeling
Right. Is their own thing.
is their own thing,
the way
but
they get there.
they've gotten
Yeah.
to this, they've had this feeling, you've
Right.
had that feeling,
Right.
different experience.
Right. Right.
But
right.
it was the
Good.
feeling
Yes.
that you were trying to get to.
Yes, and that's part of the reason that I go outside the realms of reality and use absurdism and surrealism, because I want to jar people. I don't want to say shock, but maybe jar them into doing the work. When we explain a poem, the reader's mind goes into working on the explanation. When we're reading the poem, hopefully the real action of the poem becomes experiential for the reader or the
Right.
viewer,
Right.
hopefully. Yeah.
Well, that is very interesting. I often wonder how things get to where they are.
Yes, so do I.
You do. So let's read the second poem. And this
Okay.
again, all three of these poems are very, very different. I've
Okay.
kind of chosen them from
Okay.
these two collections that you've done,
Okay.
just to see different things.
Okay.
So this one is called A Particular Kind of Church.
Okay, and what I want to say about this one is
Okay.
I get dinged a lot for doing so much absurdism and so much surrealism. This poem does not have a lot of that in it. It's more realistic. It's more realism than most. And I like this piece. It's just like a little vignette of life. 4 people had dispersed themselves in an odd way throughout the regular congregation. It's called A Particular Kind of Church. That's the title. 4 people had dispersed themselves in an odd way throughout the regular congregation. If it had not been for their unusual mismatching clothing, they may have been set just as regular visitors. Otherwise, beyond being visitors, it might be that no one would have noticed. The 4 intruders wore many layers, such that their chests and torsos seemed to stand out markedly from their bodies. Furthermore, each of the 4 had a distasteful odor that burned someone's eyes, much like a homeless person. The church had no security guard, but there were certain people in the congregation to whom the pastor could send a note, a whisper, or a glance. Soon the police were on their way. Pastor cautiously made his way through the sermon. Even though having a break at the regular church proceedings at this point in the program was unprecedented, he calmly announced that there would be a break before the next part of the service. Police had surrounded the building and would capture the 4 intruders as they attempted to escape. Privately, church leaders were breathing a sigh of relief. The police would take it from here. Each defendant was put in a separate interview room. 4 hours in the interview room seemed to produce the following. Ben said that he had heard in their camp down by the river that the pastor was going to give a sermon on homelessness, and they wanted to hear what he had to say on the topic, being homeless themselves. Rachel said that she had heard that the church serves cookies and coffee after the service, so she agreed to come along with Ben, who did not want to come alone. Julian thought they were all going to 7-Eleven to buy some beer, and he decided to tag along, so to be sure to get some of the beer. Judy asked while she was in the police station, "Why am I in a police station? Why am I in a police station?" She asked over and over, even though it was explained to her several times. No one could find an actual crime that had been committed. After 4 hours of interrogation, everyone was let go.
Again, a really interesting story that just brings up so many topics to discuss.
Yes.
So first of all, it's kind of a morality play.
Okay.
The way I read it,
All
it'll
right.
be interesting though. You say, wow, where did you get that? So it's kind of a bit of judgment on
Okay.
Christian churches.
Yeah.
Who in fact are, they have this sense, the people in this story
Yeah.
have this sense of rightness and judgment,
Right.
and it's pretty antithetical
Yeah.
to what the Christian experience is supposed to be all
Supposed to be,
about, which
yeah,
is about
yeah.
inclusion and all
Yeah,
that other.
yeah.
So it's just kind of an interesting.
Juxtaposition. Yeah.
Exactly. So now here are these Christian people, and yet they seem very closed in.
Taken aback by the real presence of real homeless people.
And it's kind of like, the parable in Luke, where the Pharisee is saying, oh, look
Okay.
at me,
Yes,
I'm
yes,
so
yes.
holy and pious, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
pray every day, and
Oh,
I fast,
yes.
and I tithe.
Yeah.
Not like this little criminal,
Yeah.
this homeless person
Right.
who's back over
Yes.
there. So it's just sort of interesting, where you put that in there and you say, well, you're not supposed to be like that. That's
Right.
not what you've been told to do.
And not all churches are like this. That's why I put it, the title as a particular kind of church. I have been to these kind of churches.
I have
do
too.
a lot of I do a
I
lot
have
of
too.
going to Christian churches of every ilk. Very conservative, very liberal, very in the middle. And I see this sometimes and I'm appalled by it, seeing it. So
Well, I'm not sure that I like you very much anymore, Mark, because what you're doing is
I
you're
didn't like you
making
before, I
me,
thought, yeah.
because you're making me confront myself. I'm
Okay.
looking at these people and saying, oh, look at how judgmental they are and everything.
Yeah.
I'm not judgmental.
Yeah.
I tithe every day, so,
very good.
you
Very
know,
good,
that
yes.
all of your poems, this is the thing that I see as a recurring thing.
Oh, what is that?
You read the poems, you try to get a sense of it, and then all of a sudden you step outside of yourself and say, but what about you?
Yeah.
How do
okay.
you fit in this?
Okay.
Which to me is
Okay.
what kind of absurdism
Okay,
does.
Okay.
When you get to absurdism, at the end of it you say, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then you have to step outside and say, what's ridiculous? That situation or you?
I see. Okay.
So that's really interesting. And with
All
that,
right.
let's take a look at the third reading.
Okay.
So the third reading is Onyx.
And
Are
this
you
one-
able to read this?
Yeah,
on
this
two
this one
pages
is
and
more blatantly absurdist. I really like this piece, but it's a lot of fun if you like absurdism. If you don't like absurdism, I can't help
stuff?
you.
Yeah, I like it a lot, actually.
All right, it's called Onyx. Nothing can be said. Temporarily, I can say that I am honestly tired. Someone said that I cannot write a straightforward sentence, let alone a paragraph. Basketballs are no longer swimming upstream. The caffeine that I drank earlier in the day is mismanaging itself and me. The caffeine is mismanaging me as well, and me, and me. I carried too many items in my backpack today, and my muscles, most especially my lower back muscles, are complaining. I have been trying to write a poem about two monks who carry a young woman across a rather wide river. Toilets at the Flamingo Motel flush in a more interesting manner than these two monks in this poem, upon which I am purportedly working. The dictionary definition of the word repetition. Lately, I do seem to be putting repetition into my work. For example, Emily Dickinson is appearing a lot, although I am portraying her in a way that may leave her mistakenly misrepresented. When basketballs attempt to swim upstream, the inexperienced ones twirl around in the water instead of making any forward progress. Many die in a way that could have been prevented. Please consider going to our website of our foundation, whose mission is to train these young basketballs to swim upstream successfully. Just go to www.whenbasketballs-swim-upstream-successfully, the world is a better place. Not just for men's underwear, but for everyone.com. I am tired. As I reach for my yogurt, I hear my fork and knife gossiping incessantly about the gray rings around my eyes. The knife, fork, and yogurt decide to tease me about my tired eyes, just the way I've been teasing them. I have played so many pranks on them in the past. One of them begins to jest by speaking these words. The gray rings around your eyes should in fact be black. The lack of black indicates a low level of onyx in your diet. I believe him or her completely, and I reach for the onyx ring, which I bought after my first successful real estate transaction. I was learning to swim upstream myself at that time. As I am reaching for the ring, I ask myself, what foods are rich in onyx? I cannot come up with a good answer. Then the fork falls all over himself or herself, prongs deep in a pile high of yogurt. The yogurt has been served on a set of 3 paper plates so that the wetness of the yogurt or its fruit blackberries will not soak through. The fork is trying to say something more, but he is surrounded, smothered by the yogurt and the fruit. I take my first bite. At least for a moment, no one knows what he wants to tell us.
I absolutely love this. So the whole idea, when you just imagine things in your day-to-day life,
Okay,
a basketball, swimming upstream,
right,
swimming at all.
right.
And yet, when you have this website, this foundation,
Right.
which has dedicated itself to this thing, makes it sound
Right.
as though it's reasonable, it's
Okay,
rational.
Okay.
So, to imagine a basketball swimming upstream, I mean, that's quite a clever little
Okay.
illusion that you ended up putting out there. And again, you know, it kind of gets this whole cycle of what's absurd, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
It's a basketball,
Yeah.
it can float, why can't it swim?
Right.
So which is absurd, you or the basketball?
Yes.
So I just really enjoy it. And I really like, you know, the person who is sitting here, who's listening to this gossip between, you know, the silverware.
Right.
All I want to do is eat, and you hear this thing, you know, that's just kind of running through your mind. It's an interesting illusion.
A lot of my pieces have anthropomorphism
They
in
do.
them. A lot of like inanimate objects have take on human qualities.
Mhm.
That's pretty common. So yeah.
It is. Those
Yeah.
3 seemed, you know, like they had touched totally different things.
Okay.
You know, kind of the perception of Zen, although we'll have to have another conversation about that, you know, on another show. I would love to explore that a little
Yeah.
bit more and
Okay.
how you approach that or try
Yeah.
to describe that. And
Okay.
then the particular church, you know, which is really more realistic.
Yeah.
And then the absurdism one, which just sort of makes you laugh and it takes you back and makes you think. You know, all of your stuff is very thoughtful, so I
Okay.
enjoy reading that.
Thank you.
So now tell me what you're working on now.
What am I working on now? I'm doing more nonfiction. I'm doing blogs the most. So I'm doing, let's see, I started 2 blogs, and then I started another blog, and I'm setting the stage for doing 2 more blogs because I send the posts out too much. I made actually 600 blog posts that were extra. I send out 1 blog post per day, plus I did 600 extra ones on text in a text file. So from 2401 to 2900 or 3000, I've done extra ones. And so because I'm making so many, I decided to do other blogs on other topics with other people so I can send something out. So the first one is general purpose. It's mostly about the arts. It's called Look and See Zen. I'm doing one about Christianity, which is called Christ and See Love. Then I'm doing a really fun one about cars, which is called Car Hungry, all about cars.
Well, I know that you had, what was the car that you had some time back? That was,
I had several. I had some fun ones. I had
Yeah.
a 1982 Sentra, which was a little puddle jumper. I had a 1983 Buick T-Type, and I had a 1987 Honda Accord with all the fixings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll have a blog about cars.
Yeah, car about cars. That's about it. I don't know what else to say.
So if anybody wanted to contact you
Yes, sir.
about your work, you know,
Yeah.
again, I find it really, really interesting stuff, and it's varied. You know, there's a whole range of things. So if somebody wanted to get some of your collections, how could they contact you to get that?
They could email me at precioustime441@gmail.
Okay, that's good. And then they would ask just for a random sample
Yeah, whatever
of your
they
stuff,
want.
and you'll
Yeah,
just
and I'll
send
send-
a
I
few
have-
things.
Yeah, I have a lot of things set up as attachments already, little
Good.
booklets.
Good, good, good. And
Yeah.
then they could start reading, and
Yeah.
then if they wanted to continue, they could get more
Exactly.
information from you.
Yep.
All right, well, that's great. And there are a lot more things, you know, that we've talked about, you know,
Okay.
just in preparation for the show. I would
Okay.
love to have a conversation sometime about Daniel Carnes.
Carms, okay.
That-
Interesting fellow. Should we do that now or not?
No, we could probably.
He was really imprisoned by the Russian government more than once, and he actually died in prison. He's has a big cult following in the United States, and there's at least one or two universities in the United States that really have built up a record of all his stuff.
Teaching his work
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah,
So
it's
that's
really
very
beautiful.
interesting.
Yeah.
All righty.
Thank
Well,
you,
I
sir.
appreciate it. Thanks very
You're
much
very
for
fun.
talking,
You're
Mark.
very
I
fun.
really enjoyed the conversation
thank
today,
you.
and we'll
Yeah.
have you on again.
All right, thank you.
So thank you all for joining us for this episode of In Our Community with Mark Isaac Potter. We'll see you again. Thank you very much.